Welcome to the chat of New Bedford Light. This is Jack Spillane, and tonight we're going to talk recycling and waste collection and a little bit of a different approach than you may have heard before to the issue. As many of you know, New Bedford's waste collection budget in the last 2 years has gone from 5.4 million to 8.7 million, and various folks have proposed transfer stations and uh, uh, extra cells in the landfill. We'll have those people on at a future chat to ask them about their approach. But tonight we're going to talk about myths of the current recycling system and ways to get to zero waste collection. I'm very excited about this program. We have the executive director of a national program, Just Zero, Wendy Goodwin Pecci, Kirstie Goodwin Pecci. I get my Wendy's and Kirstie's mixed up. And also locally, we have Wendy Morrill from South Coast Neighbors United and Tracy Wallace, also from South Coast Neighbors United. And you may be familiar with their subgroup, Citizens Against Parallel Products Project. So I want to start this off by just asking Kirstie, what is Just Zero? What is Just Zero approach to waste?
Just Zero is a nonprofit organization. There are 9 of us working right now, but we're expanding the team actually. And what we do is we look at the solid waste problem, everything we throw away, whether we're a home or whether it's an industrial or commercial or institutional waste, if you're in an office building, well, if you're a dentist, if you're a college, we look at that waste and we say, all right, how can we do better? How can we pollute less? How can we save money? And how can we be using these materials, composting them and reusing them in other ways so that we can live on this planet more safely and for a little bit longer than we would otherwise? So that's what we try and do is find solutions, and we try and help folks from around the country who are trying to solve these problems locally. At the state level, a lot of folks do their waste work at the county level. We don't do that in Massachusetts as much, but we help folks all over the country who are working on these issues and try and give them good ordinances, good laws that they can pass, but also help them evaluate proposals like the one that New Bedford has seen to figure out, is this a good idea or is this just going to cost us more money down the road?
All right. So we talk about landfills, incinerators, and single stream recycling as the ways that we're approaching New Bedford and now. Uh, tell us what's problematic about that.
Well, I could go on all day, Jack, on that, as you probably could guess. The problem is it's a very expensive system, and it's not getting cheaper, and it doesn't ever lead to less waste, right? So disposal right now in Massachusetts, we dispose of about 6.2 million tons of waste a year. That's a lot of waste. That waste goes into landfills or incinerators. We burn about half of it, and then that creates ash that has to be buried somewhere. Because there's so much waste, and because a lot of it is toxic, there's household hazardous waste, there's electronics, there's plastics, there's a lot of different toxics mixed in there. We end up with a big toxic pile that's buried in different communities forever in the landfill situation. Or if it's being incinerated, burned, we end up with contaminants, chemicals going into the air and becoming part of what, the air we breathe into our water, into our soil, as well as big piles of ash that need to be buried somewhere permanently. So neither of those solutions is a solution. They're false solutions. We need to reduce how much waste we're producing. The other thing about our disposal system is it's very, very expensive. From 2021 to 2024, Mass DEP said that the price of disposal has increased in Massachusetts by 18%. So that's after the pandemic. We're paying more now than we ever have to dispose of our trash. Meanwhile, we have our recycling system. We're not getting enough materials into our recycling system. A lot of what goes into our trash is actually recyclable or compostable, about 75% of it, I would say. And that system, our recycling system, is also not working well and is also very expensive. The cost of that system, our curbside recycling system, has also increased according to DEP between 2021 to 2024 by 18%. So we're seeing $100, a ton tipping fees for our disposal, our trash, as well as our recycling. And the problem with our recycling system, I always say, my friend Amy Perlmutter came up with this, you can't unscramble an egg. If you put plastic and cardboard and paper and glass together, you're going to destroy the value of those materials. Because you got bits of plastic in your paper, you got bits of glass in your plastic, etc. So we need systems that save us money, that keep things separate from the beginning, and actually lead to real recycling, not downcycling or trashing those materials.
Wait, wasn't it about 20 years ago that single stream recycling was supposed to be the next big thing and it was going to make it so much easier? And that's what
Jack, now you're teasing me, Jack. Now you know how I feel about single stream recycling. You're bringing it up just to get me going, aren't you, Jack? Yes, I want everyone to know that Jack got me going. You're totally correct. The waste companies said, you know what? We're going to show up with one truck. We're going to use one of those arms. We're going to dump it in the back. We're going to dump the carts into the back. And we can separate everything. We'll find a place to recycle all of it. That wasn't true. It just wasn't true. A lot of the paper and cardboard recycling in New England dried up, the facilities that actually recycled it. The plastic recycling has never worked well, if at all. And we're finding that about half, up to half of our aluminum that's in our recycling systems is being bundled up with cardboard. So it's lost and doesn't get recycled. So the glass is not getting recycled. It's being made into landfill cover and roadbed from curbside recycling. The aluminum is not getting recycled, as I just said. The cardboard and paper is getting downcycled, and the plastic's getting downcycled. It's a very expensive system. It does not work well. Single stream stinks, Jack.
and some of it's even finding its way back into the landfills and the
About at least 20% of it is going right back into the landfill, Jack, directly from the material recycling, sorting facilities. But as I said, if you've got aluminum in a bundle of cardboard, that aluminum is going to get thrown out at the cardboard facility. So again, we're seeing a tremendous amount of waste here. None of the glass that goes into curbside is being made into bottles. It's all being into roadbed or landfill cover. Now, I just want to tell everybody who's listening to this, please keep using the recycling system you have. A lot of times people from the agencies will call me and say, hey, we're working so hard to get people to recycle, Kirstie. You're telling us it's not worth it. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is the system we have now is very expensive and doesn't work well. And we could do a heck of a lot better if we keep these materials separate. And we have good ways to keep these materials separate, save everybody a lot of money, and actually recycle these materials.
So in New Bedford, the last 5 years, we've been dealing with this company, Parallel Products, that has started out doing bottle and can recycling and now wants to expand to solid waste recycling. For a while, they wanted to expand into sludge. And South Coast Neighborhoods United has been at the forefront of stopping them. Wendy, the mayor says this is going to save us $800,000 to $1 million a year off of that rapidly increasing waste stream. Why is that the wrong equation to look at?
Well, first of all, the company itself doesn't have any contracts with New Bedford. So there's that. Secondly, they only have so much capacity. And with the tentative MOAs that they had previously, those were with other communities, not New Bedford. So they would have been making money off of the backs of New Bedford residents. And nobody's talking about the other expenses and the other costs involved with trucking in 1,500 tons of waste per day into a facility in New Bedford through New Bedford roads and through New Bedford neighborhoods and past New Bedford schools, and the health impacts, the infrastructure impacts, those trucks coming in on those roads, the hazard of those trucks, the emissions from those trucks, all of that stuff. Nobody's taking any of that into account. And as one of the city councilors did say, after the mayor made his dirty deal with Parallel Products to make $800,000 roughly off of a backdoor deal that he made, that won't even pave a sidewalk. So it's not worth it. It's not worth the trade-off. Nobody ever talks about the health impacts and the cost of that. New Bedford is I think, the sixth in the area, city, as far as respiratory diseases, asthma, things like that. We can't afford to take on more toxics and more pollution in our community. We are predominantly environmental justice community, and we need to start making decisions based off of prioritizing our health and the wellness of the residents and the workers and everything in the community. Being designated a predominantly environmental justice community should be the threshold upon which they say, sorry, there's no more room for any of that there. They've reached their max. They're done. Move on.
Just for anybody who's watching who's not familiar with the term environmental justice, that means that communities that are most greatly impacted by environmental contamination and degradation tend to be low-income communities, and there are any number of uh, low-income housing developments and neighborhoods in every part of New Bedford.
In communities of color, communities with high percentages of non-English speaking residents. There's a lot of different things that trigger and define an environmental justice community designation. So we have a lot of, and it's not one city. The city itself isn't designated as an environmental justice community. It's portions of the city, and it's based on those demographics meeting some of that criteria in order to be designated environmental justice. So people need to understand that I always say this to everyone. If you've already been designated an environmental justice community, or that area has, it's already gone through its fair share of pollution, of contamination, of marginalization, of oppression, of racism, of all of that. And that should be the determination that this is no longer an option. This is not a viable option for this location, for this particular business or operation. You need to go move on elsewhere. And that's not to say that I'm in favor of putting it somewhere else or degrading another community that hasn't been designated environmental justice. Not at all. But what I do say to people is, let's put it this way. Let's say you were playing whack-a-mole on a map and you can't go there, can't go there. That's environmental justice. Can't go there, can't go there. All right, well then let's go to this, prestigious neighborhood that's more affluent. They're going to fight it, and it's not going to go there either. This is how we start to dismantle those systems in place, because they need to stop being put anywhere. There's other ways to do this, and we're not investing in those or doing the research or putting the time and effort into those if we keep on just investing and pouring into the same broken systems.
I just want to emphasize that we will have folks from the administration and Parallel Products and the Crapo Hill landfill in a future date to give their pitch. Kirstie, so you have this rapidly increasing cost. You have this proposal that the neighborhood around it is very fearful of the leach, of the trucks, of the emissions. So
Yep.
what is a community like New Bedford to do in terms of alternatives to start, solving this problem? We talked about things like composting, changing the recycling system. What kind of things would you recommend for a community like New Bedford?
That's a great question, Jack. I think that first off, the importance of groups like South Coast Neighbors United can't be understated. I saw someone online the other day who was saying, people always ask me, what should I do? And the presenter said, it's what should we do, right? And you don't have power when you're by yourself. You have power when you work together. So that's the first thing. Whatever you want to get done in your community or at the state level or regionally on the waste problem, it's about doing something as part of a we. That's the first part, which takes a little bit more patience sometimes. It takes a little bit more work sometimes, but it's really, really important to remember that you can't get anything done by yourself. Even if you're as smart and wonderful as Tracy and Wendy are, they need to work together with the team. The next thing I would think about is there's two different types of action here. One of them is looking at the state level and saying, we got to do better. Because I was just down in Virginia a couple weeks ago, and they import waste. They take about as much waste and bury it in their state in Virginia as we produce in Massachusetts. And half of our waste in Massachusetts goes to states like Ohio, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Virginia, places that don't have as good of regulations. So the first thing we need to do, the reason that New Bedford's being targeted is because this is about rail. This is about putting trash. They're calling it recycling, but what they're really doing is just going to cherry pick a few metals and a few things out of the trash and then send all the rest of the trash on rail to places like this town in Orange, Virginia that I was in, where they said, yep, there's the tracks right there, Kirstie. I can smell the trash going by 3 times a day. That's what's happening here. So first thing is Massachusetts needs to do better. And I can talk to you a little bit about different ways Massachusetts can do better and how we can all help Massachusetts to do better. And that will save us all money too. It's not, again, it's not just about the environment and public health, which are important, but it's also about doing better as far as our whole economy goes. The other part of it is making sure that the city of New Bedford handles this trash better. So that is a different question. So on the first part, I don't know if you want to get into the Massachusetts stuff too, Jack, right now, but on the first part, as far as what can New Bedford do better, there's a lot of similarities between what the city can do better and what the state can do better. First thing, composting. Reducing our food waste. That's about a quarter of what goes into the trash.
Tell us how that would work in a city of 100,000 with very dense triple-decker neighborhoods. Many people don't have much of a backyard. How would composting work in a city like New Bedford?
So we are not talking about backyard composting. Not that there's anything wrong with backyard composting. Where I live in Sturbridge, yeah, you can put it over the stone wall and it's not a big deal. You cannot do that in a densely populated community. However, we have composting pickup programs in the city of Boston now, in the city of Cambridge. Some towns have banned food from disposal, which means that if you're, for instance, you could start by saying, none of the schools or government buildings or industry or any, or restaurants can throw their food in the trash to start off with. And then over time, you develop a composting program where instead of having your trash be with, mixed in with your food waste is separated out and it's picked up in either a separate part of the truck or in a different truck entirely. You can also start with drop-off programs, see how that goes and gets going. You can use a private service, or you can use a service that's run by the city. It depends how the city wants to go. Some places like Newton, Needham, they've started out by saying, we're going to find 500 households, and they're going to get a reduced rate from the service because they all signed up together. So again, drop-off programs start with doing different neighborhoods, and eventually banning it so that, for instance, in Hamilton, Mass, Casella has a sectioned off truck. Half the truck is for food, the other half of the truck is for trash. And that's how they pick up the food waste. Now, the real savings there is not in the moving it back and forth, the hauling. The savings there is the tipping fee. A trash tipping fee, as we said, they're going up and up and up. It's much, much cheaper to compost, more like 35, 45 bucks a ton as compared to over $100 a ton for trash many times. So that's the tipping fee. That you still have to haul it. You still have to set up a system. There's work to be done, Jack, on that kind of thing, but it's work that will eventually save you money. And we're talking about reducing your trash by 25, maybe even 33%. So that's a big chunk right up front to reduce your trash by.
So how would this begin? Tracy, I know you've been involved with this, with the parallel product from the very beginning. What has been the reaction when you've tried to approach the mayor or city councilors about alternative approaches to
so we have gotten some good results from city councilors, supportive results from city councilors, but of course this all takes time. So, this work needs to keep being done because what we're trying to do is really create a culture shift, and that's going to take time to do. We were lucky to have a presenter come and speak at the library yesterday evening. He was from a local composting company, and he really kind of went over how much waste can be diverted from composting. He talked about some of the things Kirstie just mentioned, where you could have these containers in drop-off sections within the community, and they're locked, and you can get into them via a QR code, and then you can drop your food waste in there. But you can also do, of course, curbside composting, which I'm really in favor of. Dartmouth has an agreement with this company where people have signed up to do curbside composting. They have also gotten the starter kits for these curbside composting programs subsidized by is it Greater New Bedford Refuge and Recycling Commission, or
Yeah, district that
I'm
runs like with the landfill. Yep.
Yes. So they've gotten those subsidized for the first 50 people that signed up for that. So we did get some information on that. I think that it's a very viable thing that can be done within the city. The presenter did inform us about ways to get creative in terms of how to get participation into programs like these. There usually is a cost of about $16 to $24 a month to sign up and do something like that. But that really is the cost of a Netflix subscription. So if you have a Netflix subscription, you should be willing to do something like that. But also, you could be eligible for some sort of rebate. So the town of Beverly set up a rebate on a water bill. So they were able to do some calculations to figure out how much savings the town was getting from people signing up for this program. And then they were able to discount that rate to the people who were signing up for this program. So in that way, it is incentivized. So again, we have been getting some support from our city councilors, but change takes time, and a culture shift takes time. So hopefully, the work Wendy and I are doing can really put forth some seeds for some good change to come in the future.
Yeah.
And to piggyback real quick off of what Tracy just said, because it relates to what you just said, Jack, leading into that question. How do you do something like that in a densely populated area? Part of the presentation yesterday was that's exactly what we're looking for, is a densely populated area, because then their collection route is shorter. They're using less gas. There's more incentive for them to take on those customers. It's easier to do those pickups in a densely populated area. And the more densely populated it is, and the more people who participate, the cost goes down. The subscription cost goes down. And so what Tracy was talking about with the town of Beverly, the financial incentive for Beverly to subsidize the startup was that if enough people are participating in this program in a hugely populated city like New Bedford, you could reduce the waste by 40%. Think about the tipping fees the city itself is going to save on the waste that they have to ship out and that they have to pick up and they have to dispose of. So
yeah, I'm just waiting for that first city councilor or mayor to make a proposal along the lines of the kinds of things that you're talking about, maybe a pilot program or something to get the ball rolling. Kirstie, I want to go back to something that you mentioned about I've read on your website about the money that there is to be made in the waste disposal business, and the motivations of those companies is really to keep making money. That's what capitalism is. We're all part of a capitalistic system.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I think a lot of people aren't aware of, we've had a lot of talk about passenger rail coming back to New Bedford, but the plan is to use those same tracks to haul this trash out, and the transportation is where money will be made in a transfer station. Is that right?
Transportation is part of it. So again, it's about waste companies. Waste companies are vertically integrated. They're trying to do everything. They're trying to have a monopoly on the whole thing, right? But where they make their money are two different ways. One is hauling, as you just said, Jack, and one is tipping fees. So the city of New Bedford has to pay enough to get rid of its trash so that the waste company is going to make a per ton profit. And what that means is they either have to not have to take it very far, right? Just dump it right in New Bedford and get paid $100 a ton to do that, or they have to have a cheap way to bring it to, say, Virginia, as we talked about, right? Which means rail. And so, and again, the landfill down in Virginia, the land costs are lower than they are in Massachusetts. There's not as much regulation. They're going to be able to to put more there for less money, right? So it is, as you said, it's simple economics. You want to have enough disposal capacity so that you can bring it, and you want to be able to bring it there cheaply enough to make it worth your while. And there is no better business model in the world than dig a hole and bury trash in it. I mean, it really is incredibly profitable. So a waste company doesn't want to hear, we're going to stop putting all the food in the waste company, in the landfills or incinerators. They don't want to hear that all the cardboard and paper, which is another 25% of the waste, So we're talking about already getting rid of half of it if you get rid of food and paper and cardboard. They don't want to hear that that's all going to get, taken out separately and be cleaned and recycled, because they're making their money on the transport and the disposal, that tipping fee per ton.
Yeah, it's just amazing when you dig into it. No pun intended. Uh, how the system works. You've also
Yeah.
talked about we had the New Bedford Housing Director talk about Wind Waste, which is a local truck hauling company that trucks waste around Massachusetts. Uh, has I think it's in the town of Millbury, sort of up to where you are, where they have a big incinerator. He said it doesn't smell, it doesn't seem to put out many fumes. The technology has improved, and why don't we just look into something like that? What's the problem with incineration?
So Wind Waste runs the incinerator in Saugus also, so they have a couple of them. And then there's another company, Cavanta, that runs a couple of them. And I'm not exaggerating. It sounds like an exaggeration when I say this, but it is absolutely correct. And that is, there is no safe way to burn municipal solid waste. The reason for that is about 3% of it is household hazardous waste, about 3% of it is electronics, 15%, 16% of it is plastic. Never mind getting into the construction and demolition materials. You cannot burn those materials safely. The chemicals that make up plastic, like PFAS, for instance, benzene, they're like it's in styrofoam, those chemicals will not be destroyed by the high heat technology. They are never destroyed by it. Instead, they go out into the air. So it's basically landfilling in the air, is what one group calls it. And you got to remember that while we care a lot about our water quality and our soil quality, we absolutely should, you breathe 24/7. Once those chemicals are out there, a lot of them are forever chemicals. Dioxin, look up dioxin. It is one of the most dangerous chemicals known to man, and the recipe for dioxin is burning plastic. So when I tell you it cannot be done safely, it has never been done safely. It's also never been done safely in Europe. Doesn't matter if it's a brand new incinerator or the oldest one in the country, like the one in Saugus. They don't work to destroy those chemicals.
Okay, I just want to say that Wind Waste is welcome to come in and make a counter argument
Yeah.
if they want to.
What Wind Waste will tell you is that it's safe because they're allowed to do it. They have permits to do it. But remember that a permit is permission to pollute. That's what a permit is. If you weren't going to be polluting, I don't need a permit to plant my garden because I'm not polluting anyone with that garden, right? I don't need a permit to make dinner because I'm not polluting anyone when I make dinner. Incinerators, landfills, dirty MRFs, this material recycling facility, this pseudo sorting facility that Parallel Products is proposing, those all need permits because they are by definition waste disposal, which is always dangerous.
You use the term forever chemicals. What are forever chemicals?
Forever chemicals are a class of chemicals that once they're out in the environment, they don't rot or break down or disappear. They either bioaccumulate in your body or they accumulate in the soil and the water. So for instance, PFAS, if you have a field and you spread, say, sewage sludge on it, and the sludge has only 1 part per billion of PFAS, this chemical, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second. Over time, that field's going to have 100 parts per billion, 1,000 parts per billion of PFAS. It doesn't go away. It doesn't break down. PFAS is called, it's a family of chemicals called perfluoroalkyl substances. It's kind of the new kale of chemicals because it's so dangerous, because it's a forever chemical and because there's thousands of different kinds of PFAS chemicals. So again, that's just one class. There are tens of thousands of families of chemicals that are in our solid waste. Anything you can buy, you then throw away, that's going to be in our waste. And those chemicals end up in the water or in the air or the soil around these facilities. So we need to isolate anything that's toxic. We need to ban it upstream. But most importantly, we need to take the things that are clean, like our food scraps, for instance, and pull them out of the system and keep them clean so that we have a way to compost them and make new soil cleanly instead of exposing them to these forever chemicals we can never get rid of. Yeah, the forever chemicals are really serious, and the health impacts from them are all what I call the modern plagues: cancers, Alzheimer's, fertility problems, anything that's got to do with your endocrine system. Those are the chemicals that are wreaking havoc on our bodies and making us sick before our times in this country.
Can I
And
add a little more to that topic of PFAS real quick?
Sure.
I just want everybody to know, have you heard of the film Dark Waters? It was starring Mark Ruffalo. It was about the discovery of PFAS and how DuPont was contaminating water and soil in communities where it was operating its businesses and discharging into riverways and making the workers sick, making the community sick, making livestock sick.
They were spreading sewage sludge, Wendy, that had PFAS
Yes.
in it at
Yeah.
farm.
So
Yeah.
the film Dark Waters stars Mark Ruffalo. He plays attorney Rob Billett. Rob Billett is the attorney who is the lead on that litigation for that case. And South Coast Neighbors United is hosting a free community screening of another film that Mark Ruffalo is in. And it also has a bunch of different attorneys in the film itself. It's a documentary. It's not a drama. It's a documentary. It's based on real things that are happening. And attorney Rob Billett is in that film as well. And we're hosting 2 screenings of that next Wednesday. And it will be at 2:30 at UMass Dartmouth, and it will be at 6 o'clock at the New Bedford Whaling Museum. Following both of those screenings, we will have virtual Q&A panels with several of the cast members, including Rob Billett. He will be there in the evening, during the evening panel. Kirstie will be joining us, and other members of the cast and attorneys that are in those involved in that litigation, as well as the director of the film. So we invite everybody to join us. You can just show up, but we ask that people let us know. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
For
and that's
people
it.
who
That's
don't
an excellent example of those forever chemicals and how they destroyed farms all through Maine. That's a
people
really
will
good.
learn a lot more about those
Yeah.
chemicals and what's
Yeah.
happening and how widespread the effects are and what's happening about that
Yep.
if they come see the film.
Yeah, just for those who don't know, South Coast Neighbors United has been doing a series of uh, uh, um, uh, uh, lectures and seminars on various topics of uh, environmental interest on waste and recycling, and they're really terrific. They have guests like Kirstie that really come packed with a lot of information. So check them out. You can see them on the New Bedford Light.
We were inspired to do this series based on Earth Day, but also because of the work that we've done, we've learned that you can't keep coming to the table and pointing at the problem and saying you have to stop that. You have to come to the table with viable solutions as well. And there are multiple solutions to this problem. And perpetuating the waste cycle and moving trash around is not a solution.
So we
Am
have
I
a
allowed to ask next week if it's like if Rob wanted Mark Ruffalo to play him? Because I think that might be really the crucial question that everyone wants to talk about next week. What do you think, Jack? Because honestly, like Mark Ruffalo is a very sexy man. Like I don't know. I gotta
He did a
wonder if
great
Rob
job,
wasn't
though.
timid.
He
Hey,
did a
listen,
great job.
I
you
mean,
always you always have to sell the product, right?
yeah, Jack, we should all think about, just in case we become famous, I think we should all think about who we would want to play us, because I don't know if I want someone quite that attractive to play me. I don't, we gotta think about it. We gotta think a little bit about it.
I've heard a few ideas kicked around for me and Tracy by other people. It's kind of
Yeah,
funny, actually.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
We have a comment coming in from Robert Almy. He agrees with all the points that are being made. But he says that as an environmental justice community, New Bedford is by its nature a challenge to change people's behavior. How are you going to ch challenge people's behavior, Kirstie?
Tracy?
Tracy?
Tracy's
Well,
all about this. So.
yeah, I mean, it's going to take time and it's going to take work. And I think that that's going into it with that perspective is a wise thing to do. And not expecting it to happen overnight, but also incentivizing it, right? There are ways communities are incentivizing change,
Right.
and we can implement those things. And I think, we always get stuck in what we're doing, right? We tend to do the same thing over and over. And it's hard, it's hard to change. It's hard to break habits. But again, with this composting company, they have a website. You can go ahead and pre-register if you're interested. And they said if they get enough of people pre-registered, they will then work with the community to draft a program for that community. So it's done by small steps, but I think it's also done by not viewing a community in a way that prevents change from happening. And I think we all tend to view things a certain way where, oh, it's that community that will never work there, or oh, this, oh, that. So I think it is important to keep an open mind and to get to get players to come to the table. So that is how I would say
you got to start
behavior
small and work
can
your way
change.
up. It
Yeah.
starts with a group of people. That's all you need to
I
start.
would also say, and I think this is really funny because there's this idea that like, oh, if that community has money or if that community is rich, they're going to do all this stuff really well. That's not true. Okay, like Lexington does not have a pay-as-you-throw program that puts a fee on bags and reduces trash. They've been fighting over that for years. Lexington's a great place. They do a lot of really good stuff on waste, but that hasn't happened there. A lot of folks push back against cost, the perception of cost, of short-term cost. So Tracy's 100% right. You've got to incentivize it. You also can't make it harder to do the right thing than to do the wrong thing, right? So two things I would say really important to understand when you're looking at this. One, you make a plan, a long-term plan. You start small, like Wendy just said. You start small and say, this year, we're going to have X number of people sign up for the composting program. The city's going to incentivize it or pay for part of it. Next year, it's going to be this many people. By this date, it's going to be all the food scraps, right? Because that's what's happening. The state is going to ban all food scraps from disposal. New Bedford should get out ahead of it. That'll be better for them. So you set a plan in place and say, okay, this is how we're going to deal with the cardboard. This is how we're going to deal with the paper. This is how we're going to deal with reusable clothing. You make a plan and then you put it in place over time so you don't have to do all of it at once. And then when you hit those targets, people will say, oh yeah, we've been talking about this for years, I'm going to do it. The other piece of it is not just a plan with enforceable targets and goals, but also being realistic about the cost and the cost savings. Because we see a lot of nonsense by places like Wynn or Covanta or Casella or Waste Management, the landfill company. They will say, oh, this is going to cost so much for you to put in place. There's no composting program that's more expensive because it's not really composting than the waste management core facility where they chop up the food and then ship it all the way to North Andover to be mixed with sewage sludge. That's the most expensive program. So when you look at nonsense like that are not good solutions, that aren't taking advantage of like local companies that you could be hiring and working with on this stuff, yeah, you're going to get screwed over and over again. You need to look into the real cost long term and work with people like your local companies who really want to make this happen. So again, it's not about, oh my gosh, you can't change the people in New Bedford. People in New Bedford are just like the people here in Sturbridge or just like the people in Weston or Lexington or anywhere else. They don't want to pay extra, but they're already paying extra. So you got to show them how they're paying for it and how you can save the money if you do the right thing long term.
I want to ask Wendy, you guys, New Bedford has a long-term recycling coordinator, Marissa Perez Dormitzer, very active program. Are you guys working with her? How have you made out approaching her in terms of some of your ideas?
Actually, she's attended most, if not all, of our speaker series, and we've had really good engaging conversations. I think it could become a really great partnership as far as I know she's incentivized and wants to do these things. I think the struggle is that culture shift. I think the struggle is reaching people, broad outreach. And if we work together, we can help with connecting all of those things together. We are part of that community. So I'm reading the comments right now from Robert, and he mentions that increasing composting requires better siting and enforcement of commercial operations. Agreed. The company that we brought in to speak yesterday during yesterday's event is located. They have 4 different locations, one of which they just opened in Wareham. It's a smaller one, but they're looking to expand, and they're doing amazing things. And then he also stated integration of existing waste streams, including brush, food waste, AG waste, solids from wastewater treatment. This company actually does take more than just your standard composting. So we encourage people to learn more about these things. The event happened yesterday. It's all over and done with. However, if you join our groups, South Coast Neighbors United or Citizens Against the Parallel Products Project on Facebook, we did live stream all of our events, and all of the recordings are there, and both of them. So you can watch whatever ones you want, whether it was afternoon or evening, and you can learn more about the realities that we're facing and the realities of what we can be doing. So I invite everybody to do that.
We have another comment from David Tattlebaum over in Dartmouth, the town next to New Bedford, saying that town has a small food waste collection program, but it's very effective. They are preparing a video on how it works and showing the hard, cold facts on potential savings and how good it feels to participate and help.
And that's the same company. That's the same company that's doing that in Dartmouth that we had here yesterday.
Right.
Awesome. Yeah. The other thing too, if you get the food out of the waste system, you can start having your trash picked up every other week or once a month, because you don't have any putrescible waste in there. So you don't have to worry about rats in your dumpsters, for instance, and stuff. So that's another piece of it. People sometimes think composting is going to cause more problems with pests. Actually, if you do it right, it avoids a lot of problems.
There's
Go ahead.
There's also additional incentives. The company that we had speak also gives vouchers for some programs where you can go and pick up their product, the compost product, at local garden centers that partner with them. And you're getting a product that is better than really anything that you're going to find at any of the big, garden centers, really, because they do intensive testing on PFAS, intensive testing on heavy metals, and they have all of the research that shows that they have a good, solid quality product.
And one of the stores that's in this area that carries their product is Kenny's in Fairhaven, and they do accept the vouchers there. So more incentive to do this.
Very interesting. I want to talk a little bit about plastic and the complexity. I know that most of the food I buy comes wrapped in some sort of plastic, and I always want the cheapest now. It's fresh food, but it's been wrapped in plastic. And am I getting the plastic into my food? And when I was growing up, I'm old enough to remember when everything came in bottles. Kirstie, can you talk a little bit about plastic and how it just really is connected to all the food that we eat?
Yeah. So the petroleum industry, looked and said, oh, shoot, they're not going to be burning this gas in their cars or in their homes or in their businesses anymore. We need to use all this gas. And what they did is they made plastic out of it. That's it in a nutshell. The problem is you can't make plastic without chemicals. And so plastic not only is bad for the environment, but climate, because it's burning fossil fuels in the end, and it's pumping those fossil fuels. We want to keep the oil in the soil whenever we can, but also because it's so horrifically toxic. And a lot of the chemicals in this country are used to make plastic. PFAS, like we were talking about, a lot of it is made just to make plastic. So you want to avoid plastic whenever you can, but you really, as you just said, Jack, you can't go to the grocery store usually and buy food without it being wrapped in plastic. As a result, we're seeing a severe increase in microplastics in our bodies, microplastics in our brains, in the brains of cadavers, microplastics microplastics in our testicles, microplastics in women's wombs, in their breast milk. Throughout our bodies, we're seeing microplastics. And microplastics, what that means is two things. One, the plastic itself is in your body, and those chemicals in the plastic are in your body. The chemicals are going to leach into your body, which is very, very scary because they're very dangerous chemicals.
Now you're starting to depress me.
I know. And then the other problem is they absorb chemicals as they're going by in your body. So they become little microbursts of, sources of plastics. It's not just your food and beverage. So I always tell folks, you want to avoid nonstick pans, anything with a plastic coating you don't want to cook in. You don't want to heat food in plastic in a microwave. You want to avoid plastic whenever you can. I managed to get my mother-in-law to switch over to go containers that were made of aluminum for holiday celebrations because of that. I don't know if it's the best solution, but she's trying. You also want to avoid beverages and plastics whenever you can. If you want to make sure your tap water is safe. Most tap water in Massachusetts is safe. If for some reason your tap water isn't safe, then that's a different analysis. But to have your tap water tested for PFAS, for lead, for other chemicals. If your tap water is safe, then you should not be buying bottled water, ever. There's definitely going to be microplastics in your bottled water. Definitely in your plastic bottled water. Avoid it if you can. The other piece I would say is that it's not just your beverages and your food and plastic, it's also carpets, textiles, are your pillows, are your comforter, is it all stuffed with PET plastic or nylon, like polyester nylon, like these are plastics. Carpets are made of plastic almost entirely. So you want to get all those microplastics out of your life too, because as I said earlier, you breathe 24/7. So I think because of this, we are seeing a deeper understanding of the potential health impacts that plastics are having on our bodies. Again, all those, the PFAS problems that we talked about, all those same types of problems are associated with microplastics. And even a few more. We're seeing people having an increase in heart attacks, for instance, when they have plastic in their arteries. So we're seeing, Alzheimer's, we're seeing fertility issues, we're seeing children who are born with problems and just a lot of different issues, cancers across the board that are really terrifying. I think because we keep talking about the microplastic and the health piece, that we're actually in some ways going to be able to solve this problem in a different way than I had thought. We are seeing places like Montana, a very conservative state, pass polystyrene bans, for instance. I don't know if their governor signed on to it, but both of their chambers did vote for it. We're seeing folks be really worried about this, and I think we're going to see a change because of that. But that's a change that you can do the best you can with your household and your choices, but you have to understand that it really is going to take a system change to protect you entirely from the dangers of microplastics and the chemicals around them. Because it's not just the plastic, it's whether if I have a plastic bottle, if the chemicals in the plastic have also leached into my water is another concern. So it's a twofer there. So there's another place where the we is going to be really important. And actually on May 6th, there's a hearing at 1 o'clock at the State House in front of the Environment Committee about a bunch of plastic spills. And we're asking them to ban polystyrene. We're one of the only New England Northeast states that hasn't banned polystyrene, foam, styrofoam. And also we're one of the only Northeast states that hasn't banned plastic grocery bags. So let's start there and get that done. And there's going to be a hearing May 6th, 1 o'clock at the State House in front of the Environment Committee. Showing up for that, writing a letter to your legislator, making a phone call, all of those pieces, if we work in solidarity, that's how this stuff gets done. And Massachusetts is wicked behind. I'm embarrassed when I talk to people in the rest of the country at how behind Massachusetts is right now.
I do believe that New Bedford, Dartmouth, and Fairhaven have all banned plastic bags, and
It's a no-brainer. It mucks up the recycling system. It gets all the machines all tangled up. They are littered everywhere. It's stupid, Jack. Why aren't we using reusable bags, you know? And again, so many cities and towns have done it. Like you just said, I think 2/3 of them have in Massachusetts. We need it to happen across the board.
yeah. So as we go forward, what what can people do who just, they're worried about their taxes, they're worried about these bills, but they're also, people of limited means. What if you're just the average everyday person, Wendy, what would you suggest? What's the first steps to take?
Limited means doesn't necessarily mean limited capacity and capabilities. So there are small things that they can do within their own lives, within their own households, within their own community. We need to have a groundswell effect. We can't wait for it to be a trickle down effect because that's not going to happen. We have to do it ourselves. We have to take matters into our own hands. That's why we had the speaker series. We had Kirstie there to debunk the myths of the waste crisis. We had the CEO of a recycling company that is a nonprofit recycling company who spoke about the right ways to do things and how we should be doing things in our own homes. So for example, I'm just going to give a couple of quick things to try to hopefully inspire people to want to go to our Facebook groups and read and watch some of the videos that we did of the live streams of those, because I didn't know. When you crush a plastic bottle, you just devalue it in its ability to be recycled. Keep it intact, put the cap on it, put it in the recycling hole, because when it keeps its whole original three-dimensional shape, the sorting machines recognize that, and it makes it to where it needs to go to be recycled. If it's crushed, it gets thrown in the trash because it doesn't recognize the 3D design. So same thing with paper. Leave the paper alone. Cardboard's the only thing that should be actually flattened before it's thrown into the recycling. When you put it as a big box, it sees it as a three-dimensional, thinks it's plastic, it ends up in the wrong place. We can be doing our own parts, just like I just said. For example, leaving a plastic bottom place, not intact, not crushing it. Recycling the right things and not the wrong things and contaminating things. Another one that Kirstie talked about in her presentation, aluminum. We're not recycling aluminum like we should be. It's going into the waste. It's going into the landfill. It's going into the waste stream in the trash. And then the third speaker that we had was from the Fix It Clinic up in Boston. That was a really inspiring presentation too, teaching us how to not be afraid to understand how things work and kind of, do the reverse construction process and take things apart and try to fix things ourselves, or host our own community events where we all come together and kind of bond over learning how things work again and becoming our own little personal engineers in our lives. And then yesterday's was the composting. So people missed a lot of great information who weren't there. So I strongly recommend that people go to our groups and find those streams, those live streams, those videos, and learn some stuff, because it was a wealth of knowledge that was shared and expertise in these seminars.
Yeah.
And it is interesting how sometimes the cheaper solution is actually the safer solution. One example, because again, well, first of all, don't drive yourself crazy too. Like you're going to make yourself sick if you're trying to be perfect, right? Like don't throw out everything in your house and try and buy all new things. Like that's stupid and it's not going to work and you're just going to make yourself nuts. I will say some things that are cheaper are better. Linoleum is better than a carpet, for instance. Linoleum isn't always cheap, but it lasts for longer. So if you go by per year, it's a lot cheaper than carpet when you think of it that way. So linoleum is made of linseed oil. It's safe, it's clean, it's not going to get microplastics into your body. Who knew, right? That the Brady's were right. Another one is a cast iron pan. Cast iron pans are not expensive. They are a really safe way to cook, much better than a nonstick pan. Now, people talk about seasoning a cast iron pan and how much work it is. I just wash it personally. I know, but like somebody in the crowd is like hates me now. I'm sorry, but I just wash the darn thing and just keep using it. I don't season my pan or do anything fancy with it. I just wash it. So again, we use it every day. and it works great, better than a non-stick pan, much safer. So there's a lot of things like that that, again, you can do that actually are going to save you money. As Wendy said too, fix your stuff, fix your shoes, buy some good boots and keep them and fix them. You know,
Can
I
I,
mean, you know, those
can I
types of things
interject?
work too.
I just want to interject and take an opportunity real quick. Carl Anderson commented, and I thought he touched upon something really good too, which was education, cultural shift is necessary to reach the root of the problem. The generation of waste in the first place, we've talked about that, reducing the waste generation. That's goes back to the producers. That goes back to the packaging of the companies and the choices that they're making to choose the cheaper packaging, the toxic packaging. And one of the things that Katie said during the recycling seminar that we had was, we vote with our dollars. We vote with our dollars. Stop spending your money with the company that is doing that and making us all sick and keeping us dependent on using products that are packaged or made of toxic plastics.
Yep.
Force their hand with your
Yep.
decisions in your life.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
We're going to have to wrap up. We're coming to the close for now. Boy, this hour has just flown by. It's such interesting stuff to talk about. I would just say you sound very practical in your approaches. No one is saying that New Bedford needs to stop using this landfill tomorrow. I mean, even though it's not a good solution, you know, you're talking about transitioning to a different system. Would that be accurate?
And that would extend the life of that landfill.
But the best thing you can do is have that landfill last for the next 50 years because you're putting so little in it. You're only putting the things in it that you have to. If New Bedford started composting, passed a pay-as-you-throw program, I know people get really heated about them, but if you reduce the amount of trash you put in because you have to buy a bag every time you do it, everybody in New Bedford will save money. All the taxpayers will save money. It is a sure thing. Your waste will be reduced by like 30–40%. So composting, honestly, one of the best businesses that I've seen, a guy with a truck picking up all the cardboard. Cardboard by itself, not mixed with anything else, is a cash crop. And then at the state level, again, for supporting the composting there, supporting the waste reduction at the state level, bottle bill, and then those plastic bans.
Sorry, just real quick, the Facebook page with the videos is Citizens Against the Parallel Products Project. Just answering a chat question.
No, I
Yeah, I
saw,
know.
I saw. Excellent, excellent. Yep.
Usually I like to moderate the questions myself, Wendy, if it's okay.
It's okay.
So,
I just didn't want it to be
We
missed.
jumped right into our face, Jack.
I
We
felt
couldn't help
bad.
ourselves. Yeah, we couldn't help ourselves.
Listen, thank you all very much. This has been very enlightening, and I just think a lot of information that a lot of people are not aware of, and different ways to think about this waste issue and the state of recycling. So our guests have been Kirstie Pecci from Just Zero and Wendy Morrill and Tracy Wallace from South Coast Neighbors United. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next time around.
Thanks for
for
having
Thank
me.
having us.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.